Excellent. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 80 of Tech Talk Live, and today we have Michael Suzuki, and we're going to talk about testing strategies for Alfresco. You want to say hi, Michael?
Hello. Thanks for coming.
So when Michael submitted to speak at Alfresco Summit a couple weeks ago, he asked for a 2-hour slot, and we could only give him an hour. And so I said, hey, why don't you come back for Tech Talk Live, and we'll cover the second hour of stuff. So we'll review some of the presentation from Alfresco Summit, and then we'll start diving into, looking deeper at these things. Michael told me he's open to covering, answering your questions and covering additional stuff that you might be interested in. So I see a group of people hanging out in IRC. Feel free to pitch in questions on IRC and things. But before we dive into that, I want to apologize for us being a moment late starting today. I'm traveling. I'm in Copenhagen. I'm excited for the Copenhagen meetup tomorrow, and my hotel Wi-Fi was not working for this. So thank goodness the fine folks at Magenta Community Edition Integrators offered to let me use their conference room here. So thanks for saving me, Ole and Morton. Very kind of you. A lot of people have asked me about when we will have the recordings from Alfresco Summit posted, and the answer is I'm working as fast as I can. A couple of my teammates are working. We have 72 recordings, 70-something recordings we're going to post, and I think we've got 30 done, so we're making progress. By the end of November, I'm hoping they're all up there, pretty close to that. Next event will be Office Hours with Thomas DeMeo on November 20th. That's going to be a hangout like this one. Please bring your questions. I've only had a handful of questions submitted. You can email them to me at community@alfresco.com. You can post them in IRC when I'm around. You can add them to the Google Plus page. But Thomas and I are interested in, we want to hear your feedback on the questions. I post a bunch of questions on the Google Plus page. We want to know what you think about those. Your feedback on those topics, and we want to discuss some. We want to know what else you want to discuss. So let us know. And last is Tech Talk Live in December, first Wednesday in December. It's the December 3rd, and we are going to have Christopher Delp. Christopher Delp will be presenting. He works for NASA JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and they use Alfresco in a very interesting way. So he offered to present a summit. It was a really cool presentation, of which the recording didn't work. So we're going to have him on Tech Talk Live, and that's how we're going to get recorded. It's very, you can read the description. They use Alfresco to model their system, the system engineering for things like the Europa mission, and it's different. It's really interesting. So that's the bookkeeping, or the housekeeping anyway. And with that, so Michael, why don't you spend a minute and introduce, tell us a little bit about how long have you been at Alfresco? You're our automation expert. You joined and raised our QA up a level. What's your expertise and what's your interest?
Thanks for having me again, Richard. Well, joined Alfresco almost 3 years ago, and I work in a team called Benchmark with Derek Hulley. And our primary work is to benchmark Alfresco and see if it can cope with our demands. And we get all kinds of crazy questions, and particular ones are, how many documents can Alfresco handle? And these are some of the questions we try to answer. In order for us to get to that point, we need to actually automate it, because we can't actually recreate these scenarios over and over manually, because it's just crazy and it's going to be just insane to do it. And we embarked on this new project to actually write our own tools to get these answers. And one of the tools we used to use in the past was a JMeter tool. And that's the go-to tool for many users to find out figures and basically load your application. Unfortunately, it is also one of the worst tools to maintain and go and work with. And basically, we just said, this is not working for us, this is crazy, let's use Selenium, let's use all the new stuff out there, and let's see what we can build. And 2 years went by, and we came up with this kick-ass awesome application called Benchmark, and If you guys go see it on the video links for the summit, we've done some talks on the benchmark too. And what drives the benchmark is one aspect of it's the Selenium side. And this is something, an opportunity for us to talk about how you can use functional testing to validate that the product's behaving as you expected, and also if you use it in a certain way, you can actually reuse it as a library to benchmark and get some results to find out if it can cope with this kind of load or so forth. So it's really a cool tool for us to use and play and get things done. And hopefully we can part with you guys some of the things that we've learned over the last 2 years. And this is something we really see going forward, and not just being used in Alfresco, but can be used elsewhere with any particular product. And but for today, we're going to talk more about how Alfresco has moved from doing manual testing to automation and the tools that we use to get to that point. And anyone has questions now before I delve in, stop me now, or if not, I'll just go into a long history.
So the benchmark tool, or the session you're talking about, is anybody that's interested, you go to the sessions list at summit.alfresco.com, either London or San Francisco, and it's presented by Derek Hulley and Michael Suzuki, and it goes into great detail about the benchmark stuff. So Ole says that he's around to help if the demo gods are against you again.
Yes, I appreciate that, Ole. Glad to hear from you again. I did sacrifice a few computers this morning to the demo gods, so hopefully it will go smoothly.
I did chuckle that I didn't get to attend your session in London. That's the one we recorded, and you told me how it was such a painful demo, and so it was great because I watched the recording, and it's a great recording. And not only do you get the interest of the content, but I spend the whole time waiting for things to go pear-shaped. It's like, is it this one? Is it this one? And it wasn't that bad. Most of it went really well.
I like to see myself as a professional, and I can cover very awkward moments and get out. But yeah, it was thrilling. It was great, and I'm really glad that loads of people enjoyed it because it was very, very stressing.
So let's dive in and do a recap of a 10-minute summary of your 40-minute session in London, and then we'll start looking at the new stuff. Yeah,
let me share the screens again, and we'll probably go through them really quickly because most of it we covered and we know. And can you see that all right?
Yep.
So let me just increase that. So going past the introduction and why we're doing tests, I think it's all clear. It gives us that confidence that we know it's working and behaving as it should. And that's one of the things which brought me into testing, got me really involved in testing, which is knowing that I'm getting that feedback early so I can react and do what I need to do to make it go green, go work, and it's made my life so much easier. And doing that, you need to have kind of a right approach to how you do testing. And you need to know what types of tests they are and what their strengths and weaknesses. So unit tests and integration tests and functional tests are all used separately. There's no one perfect test you can write that will test everything, but you can break it down into sensible tests. Now, one thing I just wanted to share is this image, which really describes what a healthy state of testing should be in a company. So we're looking at your PowerPoint. It doesn't look like you've started your presentation, or if it does, then it's not getting shared right. Oh dear. Yeah, that doesn't look it. Okay, let's try it again. Can you see me? No, you won't see me. And entire screen. Let's see if that works. So, can everyone see? Whoops. There we go. Can you see this
There.
image now?
That looks
Perfect.
great.
So this is kind of the image that really encapsulates what I was talking in the last minute, which is having unit tests, integration tests, and functional tests. And this is kind of like the state of a healthy company test environment. So as you can see in the axis on the right, you have the complexity of making those tests and automating these tests, and at the bottom the quantity. So unit tests are easy to write and automate, and you can have many, you can execute loads, and gives you that confidence that it's behaving as it should. Acceptance criteria is more like integration tests between systems. Anything that spins a disk, you can consider as an integration test. User journeys are some of these functional tests that we were speaking about with Selenium, actually seeing how a user will come in and do certain operations on your website or software. And at the end, you have the exploratory testing, which is also some put a like an eye, like the eye in the pyramid, and basically it represents manual testing. You will always have certain amount of work to do with manual testing, and you want to have them as little as possible. So this diagram of the pyramid by Michael Cohen really summarizes the whole concept quite nicely into one image. And
so when you were sharing this in London, I wanted to ask, in your professional experience, this is ideal if you have unlimited resources, but given that we have limited resources, how do you decide what not to test?
Well, it comes down to working with your team and finding out what the PMs want to do, and what not to test is really down to just using your common sense. So there's points where there's no point to test things that you know aren't working, because that's just going to waste your time. And until someone sorts that out, you put them in a different bucket. So you take different approaches of quick wins to get to the point where it's stable and it's running, and then you take another stab at it from a point of what's the minimum bare requirements that you need and for the product to work. And once you pass these stages, then you get to the refinement to performance testing and making sure every edge case scenario is covered. But really, to get you going, you need to just have the core functionality working for you to know that it's behaving as it should, and gives you the confidence that the user experience is not affected. We're getting to the stage where those core functionalities, core tests are being covered. We're getting to the point where we can do more exploratory testing and making sure things are absolutely right and the user experience is intact. So it really comes down to common sense and what's the priorities.
Good advice.
So moving on from the pyramid, we've covered.
I was also thinking that as you prioritize what to test first, it's important to think about where the biggest risks are.
Exactly. And what we want to do is developing anything new and going forward, you want to know that it is working, so you don't waste anyone's time. And with the legacy, one of the challenges we have in Alfresco is testing all the legacy stuff, which we have version 3 to 4.1, 4.2, and now 5.0 is going to be coming out soon. So making sure everything still works is quite a challenge. And whatever we do in terms of 5.0, that bug fixes that come from 4.1, 4.2, those need to be brought along and integrated with all the other versions as well. So testing comes in, and initially there's a bit of a time, and it takes an effort to get to that point of developing it. But once you get it there, the response and the feedback you get from something breaking is a lot quicker for you to go and find out what's changed and fix it than trying to figure out at what point did it come in. So it gives us these guarantees, and it pins the functionality and helps us actually really react quickly to when a problem comes in before it just scales out and spirals into a mess. So one thing to keep in mind when you're writing tests in development, it does seem to take a lot of effort and a lot of time, and that's part of testing. But what it will give you in terms of development going forward, a better understanding of when something is working, something isn't working, and what's changed, how did it change, and why it's broken, and gives you that real good feedback on reacting time that allows you to do it calmly rather than in a panic-stricken moment on a live production environment. So going back to the slide, the tool we use is Webdriver Selenium, and it's an API for interacting with browsers, supports different OSs, languages, and browsers. So some of the tools that we have here is the WebDriver code, how we started, and we won't go into too much of it. And all I can say to summarize these particular slides is when you work with Selenium WebDriver, what you have is basically the following operations. The 4 key operations are: you start the WebDriver, then you navigate to the page that you want to interact with. Once you're in the page, you have to locate the elements. And to locate the elements, you have different strategies where you can find it by ID, CSS, tag name. And once you find these elements, you then interact with them. And you either send keys to it, you clear it, or you click on it, or you check if it's visible or not. So these are the basic operations that you have in Selenium in a nutshell. And that's all you need to know and do with Selenium. And that is basically the gist of Selenium, which allows you to interact and navigate with the WebDriver, with Alfresco or any other page for that matter. So now that we've covered that, we're all experts in Selenium, I hope.
Getting there anyway. We know where to start.
Brilliant. So if there's no particular question with Selenium, it's a whole broad topic that it's continually changing, it's growing. It's like Alfresco is going to be 5.0 soon. They've completely skipped a version. And it's also going to be compatible with mobile. So it's quite exciting what they're going to do with it going forward. And in Alfresco, we use it as our underlying engine to interact with the Alfresco pages. So one of the last thing I want to kind of talk about before we go into the demos is probably best practices and patterns that we've come across and used and even created. One of them is the page object pattern, and the page object pattern essentially is what you see on the page, you map it to an object that you create, and that's the page. And it's encapsulating the complexity of that page into the page object that you have, and it gives you an API to interact with it. And what's good about that, it's reusable, encourages reuse of code, it's easier to read and maintain your test, and you're decoupling your test having WebDriver stuff inside the test and the test itself. What we like to do in Alfresco is we like to separate the tests. All the test should do is really assert, nothing more. You have probably the teardown and the setup at the beginning. But apart from that, what it should do is really assert if it's true or false or the correct values and so forth. And the page object really hides all that complexity of interacting with the page and doing stuff in the page. So it's a nice way of maintaining the test and your interaction or commands with the page. Just to give you an idea, we have about 8,000 or so tests, and if you have those code mixed together, it is a real hard task of refactoring and changing it. And it really stops you from doing cut and paste and copying, logging all over every test that you have. It encourages good object-oriented programming and reuse. So the page object pattern definitely is something that we use and encourage. And
the page object pattern is a wrapper your team wrote around Selenium that brings the Selenium interaction with Alfresco into a higher level, so you can interact with it using Alfresco concepts rather than purely web browser Selenium concepts. Is that correct?
It is a common pattern that's out there, and what we've done is we created a project called the Share PO project, and its acronym is for Page Object. And basically what we've taken is taken the hassle for most people to write these page objects to interact with Alfresco Share. We've already started writing them, and we've packaged it as a library that anyone can use, and we'll have the links showing up at the end. And basically, you take the page object pattern package that we've written, and just reuse it, and it basically maps to the pages that you see in Alfresco. So we're hoping to save time for most people from writing these, and there are pages that we haven't covered yet, and we're always open to suggestion if people want those particular pages covered. We'd love to hear any noise that you guys make, but we try to give you these toolsets to go ahead and do things on your own and validate. So if you've written like an extension and you want to make sure that you haven't broken anything, with the new Alfresco SDK, and if Ole and Gabs get a chance to do my pull request, we'll have that inside, and basically we'll have all the libraries that you need to do the test, and also samples to how to write the test that will be already embedded with the archetypes. So something to look forward to with SDK2, Alfresco SDK2. But going back to what we have the page object pattern, and then the last pattern we've created is the render pattern. And the render pattern has been implemented, and something that we came up with, which is to solve one of the key issues in Selenium, which is intermittent failing test. And one of the problems with Selenium is sometimes it just does things too fast, that the browser or the page can't react in time, or it doesn't allow it to give enough time to deal with certain things such as page loading and rendering or complex AJAX stuff. So what we've done is a really simple concept where we have a logic that just checks if those particular elements that you want to interact with the page is visible. Only then would it return that page object, and hey presto, you can interact with it. Otherwise, it will just go in a loop and give it a couple more tries before deciding to throw an exception and say it's not ready. And it's a basic, simple concept that just, rather than finding every element and checking if every element on the page is ready as you're doing the test, just do a holistic general, come to the page, like a human eye. If you see the page is still loading, just wait a couple seconds. If not, then yeah, it's ready to use. And what we do is the key elements that we want to interact on the page is the particular elements that we look on the page to see. Otherwise, we'll be wasting time just waiting for it to come to appear eventually. So these are the two patterns that
I was just going to restate. So the render pattern is simply a call that instead of doing a timeout and making your test go really long to be safe, you can just do it a bit more event-driven and say, when you're done rendering, let me know, and then it'll work.
Yeah, because what we found was people putting thread sleep everywhere for 4 seconds or 1 second, and you see the problem with that is it's so hard to maintain. If we have 8,000 tests and people writing thread sleep here and there to hunt them down, it's something I wouldn't want to wish, and to run these tests takes days as a result, and so we're just burning money doing that. And what we've done is just removed all of it and just went, rather than, oh, let's wait for the whole thing to appear and wait 4 seconds, which is hard-coded, we just loop it a couple times to make sure everything on the page is ready. And that actually really worked out for us. And when we don't use the render, we can actually see that the page is not loaded because it's blank, or it really gives you the feedback that you were looking for to say, yes, the page is still loading, so it's not ready to use, rather than a failed test or a problem in So it really separates the testing and interacting with the elements of the pages quite nicely.
And that's the render method on the page object that comes back when you initialize your page, correct?
Exactly, yes.
And so the page object lives in the Alfresco source tree. It's an Eclipse project. So if you get the community edition sources through GitHub or Subversion, but it's also has an example of creating a test that will soon be added to the Maven, to the SDK 2.0 that we sometimes call the Maven SDK, but it's just the modern Alfresco SDK.
Yes, which is very, very cool, and can't wait for it to come out as well. I think this kind of leads us nicely into the SDK, and hopefully you guys will see the screen and the demo gods will be happy with me today.
Yes, so Martin asks, with the Alfresco SDK update, when your pull request gets merged in, that will make it possible to run tests on external add-ons via Maven's integration test. And I think the answer to that is that it shows you an example of how you can run your extension, it shows you an example of how to use Maven's integration test to run a test that you write, but you'll have to then apply that to whatever add-on you want to apply that for, correct?
Exactly. We have a couple profiles. One profile is the regression test, which will run the whole regression test suite that we're using in Alfresco, which takes 333 minutes to run. So if you accidentally type that, just be prepared for it, and that you have Firefox popping up left, right, and center on your laptop for the next 333 minutes, hammering away at your Alfresco. So you have that, and then for whatever extensions you write, we have a sample of Hello World that we've written, and how you can write a functional test for it. So I think this leads us in quite nicely into that. So
I can see Martin rubbing his hands, excited to start testing all the add-ons he's been putting together in the Order of the Bee collection.
Oh, brilliant. So I hope you can see this now. I'm going to go into my terminal. So
can you bump up the font some?
Oh man, how do you do that?
If it takes more than 5 seconds, it's not worth it. Your font's not too bad.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah. Yep.
So what I've done essentially is basically these are some of the commands that I've added to just give me a bit more flexibility. Just gave Maven options a few more gigabytes of memory, and Maven archetype generate to get Alfresco amp running. And what we have here on the left, what we probably can do is just start over and see if the demagogue's really happy with me. And did the font go small again? There we are. So we're just going to delete everything. Why not? That's what people came to see me for, really. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a few archetypes. We have 2 screens. So those of you who've seen Tech Talk 79, one of my favorite episodes about the SDK, this is kind of like the options we have to create the archetype. I'm going to put number 2, I don't know if you can see that, call it org demo talk, and give this the Alfresco amp, so we know that's the Alfresco amp. Now create another one for share, so put number 3, org.demo talk, and call this share amp, and then we'll use the latest stuff. So now what we have is the Alfresco amp and the share amp. We'll go in. I'll just quickly do it, import it into Eclipse. Those of you might notice I type that there, but you can, as I'm old school, I tend to type a lot. But you can do the let's import. I think Eclipse have all these cool things that does that, which I hardly use. So if we just import these now, we'll have our Eclipse appearing. Hopefully you guys can see that. That's not too bad. Just refresh that. There we go. So what we've added to this project is a new integration folder which will have all the tests. Otherwise it's pretty much identical to your standard Maven structure. So if I went in here, you can see we have well, Alfresco standard Maven structure because we have the Tomcat and a few other things. But if you go into the source, you would have your usual test directory, your main directory, and what we see here at the very top, we've added an integration directory to add your integration tests and all the goodies that come with it. So what I'm going to do here is we're just going to do Maven Clean install, and is it amp2war? There we go. It's basically its command to start Alfresco and run it as a war. And while it's doing that in the background, we go quickly over back to Eclipse and just see the test. So the original test you had, demo test that just tests your simple Pojo. What we've done is just kind of modified it to actually check how many directories are in the welcome, and then we have a integration test here which wires everything up so it validates that the Spring context and everything is correctly wired and working properly. Then the cool part we have that we've added is the integration test. So in the integration test is taking that Selenium and going to the hello world that we've created, and we expect to see a message there, and let's see if that's already up and running. We're almost there. We can soon run it. So what we're doing is basically starting a Firefox driver. Here we're using basic Selenium. Oh, that's quite convenient. What? No, it's not ready. Sorry, the computer just decided to change screen. So what we have here is basically the setup of the test. What we're going to do is just log into Alfresco and go to the Hello World page. We have here the after the test, just tear it down. And then we have some tests to see if title displayed. Now you can see that we're using demo page here, and if you look, we have the demo page itself, and what we have is just a few elements on the page that we're looking for. So we're looking for the title, and we have a few helper APIs here to tell us if it's visible, and then these are basically all the methods that we're using in the test to interact with and validate that the page is appearing. So, hey, that's perfect. So you have two options of doing it. You can run it with a Maven command, or you can run it from Eclipse. So
that's what Ol was just saying, was that he says that running Maven Eclipse : has been finicky, that it's been more reliable for him to import the project into Eclipse.
Is this Ole?
Yeah.
Is he using IntelliJ? Or is this Eclipse?
He was saying Eclipse, but we'll see if he...
Yeah, well, we've known Ole to sabotage Eclipse's effort as he is an IntelliJ lover. We'll see how it goes, and
so it's good to know there's both ways, and there's both ways, not only for launching the project in Eclipse, but for running specific tests. You can either do it from the command line or from within Eclipse.
And the benefits of doing from a command line is we use Bamboo, and those who don't use Bamboo, who use Jenkins or whatever continuous integration framework, you can run it from command line, and it's something that allows you to set that up as a continuous integration. So you'll have a lovely email coming from your build manager saying that the build's broken or not. And so let's put some debug points somewhere so we can see actually what's happening. So in this particular one, we're seeing titles displayed, test. As you can see, that Selenium has started and it's navigated to the page. Here we have demo page, and at the end you can see the render method just validate that the page is there, and we can see it's there. Oh, sorry. Mackeys. So now, all we see in this test is a nice clean assertions. We don't have any code to get to do and interact with certain things. All we have is just assertions, and that's kind of like the state you want to have, because it's easier to see what we're asserting, what we're doing, and what the state of the test is. And I mean, we won't go too much into it, but this is a simple test that allows you to do that if it's showing correctly. So hopefully this should all go green, and those people, those of you who don't know, I am really colorblind between red and green. Most people didn't realize that and thought I was just joking, but yes, I am color visually challenged. So what I should mention is that we do use testng for the functional tests because it gives us more flexibilities and more steps that we need rather than JUnit. And I can see something red here, which let's just open see what's happening. So exceeded max wait time. I wonder if it's because I was just hovering above it and just let's just let it run freely and see what happens. Why is it doing that? Sorry, my laptop started behaving in a very strange way. Just changes screen for no reason. But
from the upgrade to Mountain Lion or whatever the latest is.
Oh yes. So when IT tells you not to upgrade your OS, sometimes you should listen to them. Not that I have upgraded, but if I would have upgraded it, these are kind of the problems you would see. So as you see, the test has gone green. I think I was just messing with the tests when I was doing the debug and not letting it do certain things that it kind of stopped waiting for me and went red. But essentially that kind of gives you the idea of how it works. And if I want to change the title to say welcome to today's talk, we should see that going red. Oh, it keeps doing this. So yes, it has gone red. The title's not displaying the correct value, and if we wanted to make that go green, we'd go find that in the code, and then if I remember where it is. So long since I've been here. No. There we go. No, we're not using the demo here. Sorry, why is that? Yeah. It's right in front of me the entire time. So welcome to today's talk. Is that what I've written in the test? There it is. Welcome to today's talk. Hopefully that should go green. So as you can see, it's super fast and it gives you instant, well, close to instant. It gives you a really quick responsive time. And one of the cool things about the hot code reloading, you can do the changes and then run the test immediately after and just see it happening and see it go green and getting fixed, which is why I love the new setup that we have and can't wait for SDK2 to come out. So that's that. Do we have enough time to do share?
Yes. And yes, that is very cool.
So while that's running in the background, let's just go into share. Did I do Maven Eclipse on it? Yes, I did. Again, if we do Maven Clean install minus -e amp to war to just run this, and what we'll do is import a new project in here, which we didn't get to do earlier. And I can see share amp, and let's import that one in. Again, very similar structure. However, in share you don't have so much Java stuff in there, but you will also find a new integration folder which will have everything you need. Sorry, that's a new Eclipse. Everything's new. So you have your page objects, which is the demo page, and you have the demo test, and this is where Ole's expertise come in, and it's basically the sample that Ole wrote. All we've done is just added ID to it so we can find the element quicker. And now share doesn't take too long to run. Amp to one. Let's go. Well, I think it isn't ready to be run today. For some odd reason, I don't know if repetition or force feeding it another Maven Clean install will work. But if it doesn't, I'm happy that we at least did the Alfresco amp, because the share amp is pretty much exactly the same, only interacts with the share page. The only other difference we have with the share amp is you can actually use and see some of the page objects that we've implemented in the share PO, so you can reuse them and extend them and work with them. And as an example, in the demo test here, we can see is that the right test? Yeah. So the demo page we're using for share, as you can see, it extends the share page. And this, if you go in, unfortunately I didn't import the sources, but that takes you into the share PO project. So, and you have a wealth of page objects and information that you can reuse and do and extend. And the share page.
Do you know the Maven command to import the sources?
The Maven command is the Maven dependency : sources. We can do it. Right. Did I just see that? Looks like it's running. So, determination, that's how you get through with testing. So, let's see, let's just run this one and see, put a debug point again to just allow us to see what's happening, because it does happen really quickly. And debug is SMG. So what we should see now, the page appearing, you can see, oh man, it does that all the time. Whoop. So it takes us to the page, but we're not seeing it the right page because it's expecting it on a port 81. So I'm going to cheat bit and type that in here. Now this is the first time we're coming into the page, so it'll take some time to load. And what we tend to do, that was very quick. Let's try again, and maybe this time we'll see it. So what we tend to do is change the port, because we're not using the default port. What we're going to do is share target URL port, is it? Or hopefully this is.
So that's the VM arguments of the debug configuration
exactly
in Eclipse.
So as you can see, you just add that in because it's not using the default ports, so you just have to override them. There's a property files that you can see in the page share PO project of all the things that you can override and change. And what we're seeing here is the sample that Ole wrote in a while ago, which we've just added a few IDs so we can find elements on the page. And let's minimize that so we can see. So it has the page rendered. We're checking the page is not null, and we're just checking if the title contains. This is a simple page. Just realized I was pointing at it, and obviously you guys can't see my fingers, but it seemed like everything went green. Once again, you can do changes. One thing that Ole has mentioned to me, which is very correct, and I was very naive, is that if you change some of the properties, you do need to restart it. So some of the messages that are written from the property files, you won't see those changes in hot code reloaded. You'll have to restart it. But otherwise, you can pretty much change and move the layout and do things and test it right away.
Can you walk us through the design or some of the major functions in a page object, in one of the shared page objects?
Yeah, we can do. So we can try and find some of them. There's quite a bit of development going at the moment, and I've been pulled away from doing this to concentrate on benchmarks. So,
well, you've got some major Enterprise Edition release or something coming up?
Yes, we do. Glad you
imagine that being something that would preoccupy your team.
Yes, so I am very lucky that I've been given some time to go ahead and take time to talk with you guys, because they're very, very keen and eager for the 5.0 to come out. So we're very close to doing that, and we're all hands on deck around the clock making that happen. So
Ole says, is a pro tip, use Webdriver wait from Selenium to set up conditions instead of using a custom timer to wait for elements to appear on the page.
So that is a really good way of doing it, and there's two waits that you can do. There's a generic wait that the WebDriver does, and we don't encourage using that because that's a global value. So if you change that, that's going to change the WebDriver's waiting time for every following operation. So there is the fluent wait method in the WebDriver, which allows you to just change a particular way, because what you don't want to do is just change the entire waiting default, because that will just really, really give you mixed readings, and intermittent failures will reappear. So if you wanted to change or do a particular wait, we recommend using the fluent wait, and which has a condition that meets, then it will release it. And otherwise, if you start changing the global weights of a WebDriver, you're in for a very big surprise when you're running loads of tests.
And you're saying fluent wait?
Yes, I think it is fluent wait. Well,
and Ole's tip was use the .until, and then you pass it an expected conditions presence of element located by, and then you can hand it your specific class.
Yes, we definitely recommend doing that. That is the preferred way of for waiting for elements to appear or disappear, depending on what you're looking for, expecting to happen. So yes.
So Sujay asks, and I apologize for saying it wrong a moment ago. Sujay asks, does the share page object only support the iCal pages, or does it support the older ones too?
So it supports mainly the old pages at the moment. The iCal pages are coming in, and it supports that as well. What iCal also provides, which we aren't going to cover today, is they have widget-based testing. So it's basically unit testing of these widgets, and it's far quicker and responsive doing for our development, adding widgets to do these kind of unit tests. What we then come and do is, on top of that, with the Selenium, we just see how all of these widgets come together and work properly. So hopefully there will be talk, or there'll be more information out on how these widgets are being tested, and definitely is a very, very cool, easy framework, which I'm glad it's getting its traction now.
Well, and in fact, Dave Draper did a blog post in February called Unit Testing iCal, and he explains a bit about how to test iCal. Of course, it doesn't, it's unit testing. It's not going through Selenium in the front end, the browser, but it's useful.
Some of it they do use some aspects of Selenium, but what SharePO and what we do in Alfresco automation is we try to recreate a real user experience as realistically as possible. So we've been asked, why don't you use HTML units or browserless, headless browsers to do it, because it's a lot quicker. And the reason is we reuse these page objects and interactions for the benchmarking, where we want it to be as real use as possible, so we can actually see page having problems coping with 50,000 sites on the dashnets, and we actually get to see these problems as a result of using real browsers. So the iCal and all the other units testing are quick and easy and headless for the speed and the quantity that we were testing. And then the functional test, going back to the pyramid, it's a bit heavier, there's a bit more work, there's a bit more difficulty implementing it. But the reward is that we actually get as real user experience as possible as a result of it. So that's kind of
Do you do all your functional testing against the full repository stack, or do you mock out the repo?
So we do, for the full, for Enterprise Edition, we do that, and also for Share. By the way, someone did ask the question in the Summit, and I'll probably iterate again. All the code's open source, and the Enterprise Edition and tests are also in there. We don't distinguish between them. They're all shipped out, but there will be a profile that says run them with this or run them with that. So this will work for both community and enterprise.
When you do your unit testing, is there some way that you prefer to mock out the repository, a tool that's worked out well, or do you do both the functional and the unit tests with the repository behind Share?
We tend to do it with both the real repository and Share and Solar, because by the time we get the product at this point, we want to make sure everything's strung together. And you can easily do certain aspects of mocking, because essentially what you're doing is just testing the Share application rather than Alfresco repo. But what's nice about doing it this way is that it actually also gets to test Alfresco repo, and sometimes we get things that we wouldn't have found unless we've had everything wired up, so without any mock-ups. So hence why it's an end-to-end testing.
Excellent, makes sense. Ol says that he's been talking to Dave Draper about the iCal unit tests and maybe putting them into the SDK, so that is on his to-do list. And David Webster pitched in, thanks for attending, David, to say that the blog post I referenced from February does use Selenium, but that there's been a lot of improvements since then. So he's volunteering to give another Tech Talk Live. We'll maybe in January we'll rope you in, David.
Yeah, and that'll be something I'll look forward to seeing as well. And yeah, so I mean, if there are any other questions. But just recapping, there's quicker ways of getting the test to validate your behavior, but what we've done is the long-rooted way to make sure everything actually works, so that's why we don't mock up anything, and we use real browsers to imitate real users. But yeah, you can definitely change things to mock certain things to just get the answer you need to make sure it's working. And ideally, the more unit tests you have, the less functional tests you need. You just need a few to just see everything strung together correctly.
Excellent. I'm checking to see if there are any remaining questions in IRC. Were you able to get the source for a share page object loaded, or was it giving you trouble?
I found it. Sorry, I just got distracted by all the questions. So it's still work in progress. We'll just pick some of the pages. I don't know, dashboards always. We have a login page or the People Finder page that we saw in the previous example. So one of the things that we've tested and seen earlier is the test actually going to the demo page that we saw, Hello World, and then actually also went to the People Finder page to interact with the People Finder page. So this actually is the People Finder page, and you would have, as we've seen in the demo page, certain things that we expect to be on the page to interact with the buttons and the inputs. We have a sample here of the render, how we synchronize and loop until we find all the elements, and only upon finding all the elements we want to interact with that we return the page. So it's almost like a self-factory. And if we don't find it, then we continue through the loop, and eventually we have a timer that we set, and the render timer can be configured, but we set them to say, well, if it ran out of time, then you need to throw page and render exception. Then the share page is where you have all the common things that you have across share, and what's nice about the whole page objects is it supports inheritance. So if you just, I don't know if those of you remember struts, there was a thing called tiles, and where everything is made of like blocks of tiles, and you can reuse to make that page and build these page. And so it's kind of like that kind of way. So you would have the footer at the bottom, and let me just see if there's a footer here. Yeah, you would have like commonality that you find in the footer, the copyright. So these are the things that you find in every page. So we just put it here in the abstract of the Alfresco share page. And then this is going to probably change. This is a WebDrone thing. What I didn't mention is
It's a what thing?
A WebDrone.
WebDrone.
WebDrone is basically Alfresco's wrapper of Selenium WebDriver. It has just a few more things that we need that Selenium doesn't provide us at the moment. And so it's a specific ability to pull properties so we can check the title and the labels, and one language matches the one we have in the different languages, and just a few other goodies that we have, and some image recognition ability so you can tell between one logo to the other, which is quite handy when we're doing community or enterprise, so we don't mix the logos up and so forth. And colors for people that are challenged like me. So yeah, but by all means, one last thing I probably should.
Yeah, the slide of links.
Yes. Whoops. That's a very technical term. Whoops. So these are all the links and places where you can get more additional information and the actual code to do what we've seen today. And I do stress that I do apologize that we don't have the SDK2 with the test stuff all out and ready, but it will be coming soon.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Michael.
No, thank you. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I definitely have enjoyed it better this time. I think the demo guys appreciated my sacrifice.
It went very well and very interesting. It was useful to be able to go into a little more detail on some of the areas where I was fuzzy after your summit session. And so just a reminder that the next Tech Talk Live is December 3rd. We're going to have Christopher Delp, And November 20th, we're going to do office hours with Thomas DeMeo, and we would appreciate your comments and your questions. And thank you, Michael. If anybody has questions, do you hang out in the forums? Is that a good place to ask you questions, Michael?
No, just drop me a line. I'm on Skype, Twitter, but yeah, just drop me an email or anything. I'm more than happy. Or just invite me out to the pub. I'll be there.
So michael.suzuki@alfresco.com.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And if anybody else has follow-up questions, that's the place to do it. And appreciate your time, Michael.
Thank you, guys. Take care.